Look at these black people pretending they belong in our neighborhood. I'm calling the police right now. The white woman's voice slices through the wedding celebration like a knife. The wedding ceremony freezes mid-vow. Guests gasp collectively, heads whipping toward the commotion. The bride, Amara, clutches her bouquet tighter, white knuckles visible against the delicate flowers. Her eyes fill with tears that she refuses to let fall. The carefully arranged lace of her gown trembles with her body. Two police cruisers screech to a halt at the venue entrance, lights flashing. Officers emerge with hands already positioned near their weapons, approaching with calculated caution. The accuser, Diane Reynolds, marches toward them, pointing dramatically at the wedding party. "I've lived next to this venue for 15 years, Diane announces, voice deliberately loud. "These people broke in. They have no reservation. They're trespassing and need to be removed immediately." Wedding guests rise from their seats, murmuring in confusion and anger. Amara's father steps forward protectively but is stopped by the groom's outstretched hand. Sheriff Darnell Taylor stands perfectly still, his expression betraying nothing as he watches the officers approach. His best man whispers urgently in his ear, but Darnell simply straightens his tie and reaches slowly inside his jacket pocket. Diane's lips curve into a triumphant smile. "See? He's probably got a weapon," she hisses to the nearest officer. Instead, Darnell produces a gleaming badge, holding it up so the sun catches its surface. "Sheriff Darnell Taylor, County Sheriff's Department," he states, voice resonating with authority. "This is my wedding. I reserved this venue 6 months ago, paid in full." The nearest officer steps back, hand dropping from his holster. Diane's face contorts from smug satisfaction to horrified realization in an instant. How will the celebration recover after such a deliberate act of racial profiling? Sheriff Darnell Taylor and his fiancée, Amara Bennett, arrive at Lakeside Gardens 3 hours before their ceremony. The venue sprawls before them, manicured lawns rolling down to a glittering lake, white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an arch draped with roses and ivy. The late afternoon sun bathes everything in golden light. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures," Amara breathes, squeezing Darnell's hand. Her face glows with anticipation, dark eyes taking in every detail of what should be the perfect setting for their vows. Thomas, the venue coordinator, hurries across the lawn to greet them. "The happy couple arrives," he calls, clipboard in hand. "Everything is on schedule. The catering staff is setting up in the reception hall, and the florist just finished the arch." "It's perfect," Darnell says, surveying the scene with satisfaction. "The months of planning, the careful selection of this exclusive venue, it's all coming together." Across the pristine lawn, a movement catches Darnell's eye. A woman stands at the property line, watching. She wears pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt, her arms crossed as she observes the activity. Something in her posture suggests disapproval. Amara's family arrives in a caravan of cars. Her parents, siblings, and cousins spill out, carrying boxes of personalized decorations, framed photos, handcrafted table settings, the unity candle her grandmother hand-painted. They laugh and call to each other as they begin transforming the elegant venue into something uniquely theirs. From her vantage point at the property line, Diane Reynolds narrows her eyes. She watches the black families in formal attire arriving, setting up. Her lips press into a thin line. "Lakeside Gardens has certainly gone downhill," she mutters to herself. "That Franklin never should have taken over from his father. These people can't possibly be clients. Who would rent the entire venue to them?" She pulls out her phone, scrolls through contacts until she finds the venue office number. The call goes straight to voicemail, closed for the private event. Diane ends the call without leaving a message, jaw tightening. Darnell notices her watching as he helps unload decorations from his car. He pauses, considering whether to walk over and introduce himself, but decides against it. Today is about celebration, not confrontation. Amara's father joins him at the car, following his gaze. "We being watched?" he asks quietly. It's nothing to worry about, Darnell assures him, though a familiar weight settles in his chest. Let's focus on making this the best day of Amara's life. Across the lawn, Diane pulls out her phone again, scrolling to a different contact. Her expression hardens with determination as she puts the phone to her ear. The ceremony is minutes from beginning. Guests find their seats, arranging themselves on white chairs that face the lake. The string quartet plays softly. Darnell stands at the altar with Aaron, his best man, adjusting his cufflinks one final time. "You ready for this?" Aaron asks, grinning. "Been ready for years," Darnell replies, scanning the gathering. His colleagues from the sheriff's department sit alongside Amara's hospital co-workers, two worlds merging. At the venue entrance, Diane approaches with purposeful strides. She intercepts Thomas, who's directing latecomers to available seats. "Excuse me," she says, voice sharp enough to turn heads. "I need to speak with you about this event." Thomas offers a professional smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is a private wedding. If you're not on the guest list—" "I've lived next to Lakeside Gardens for 15 years, Diane interrupts. "I know every event that happens here, and these people can't just show up and take over." Thomas's smile falters. "Ma'am, this is a legitimate, fully paid reservation. The Taylor Bennett wedding has been on our calendar for months." "I want to see documentation," Diane demands. "I know the owner personally." "I can't share client information," Thomas says firmly. "Now please, I need to ask you to leave. This is a private event." Diane spots Franklin, the venue owner, speaking with the caterers near the reception tent. She brushes past Thomas, marching directly toward Franklin. "Franklin! Franklin Whitmore!" she calls. Franklin turns, confusion crossing his face. "Diane, what are you doing here?" Diane lowers her voice, leaning close. "There's an unauthorized use of the property happening right now. Did you approve this gathering?" Franklin's brow furrows. "Of course I did. It's the Taylor Bennett wedding." "Are you sure?" Diane whispers, glancing meaningfully at the predominantly black gathering. "These people claim they have a reservation, but something doesn't seem right." Franklin shifts uncomfortably, looking over at the ceremony setup. "Let me check on this," he says, moving toward the altar. He approaches Aaron first, speaking in hushed tones. Aaron's expression darkens as he listens. He gestures to Darnell, who excuses himself from a conversation with the officiant. "Mr. Taylor," Franklin extends his hand. "I'm Franklin Whitmore, the owner. I apologize for the interruption, but my neighbor has some concerns about your reservation." Darnell maintains a neutral expression, though his jaw tightens slightly. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" "Just a verification issue," Franklin says, not meeting Darnell's eyes. "She's questioning the legitimacy of your booking." Darnell pulls out his phone, taps the screen several times, and turns it toward Franklin. "Here are the confirmation emails and receipt for payment in full, dated 6 months ago." Diane appears at Franklin's elbow. "Anyone can fake an email," she interjects. "Where's your contract?" Amara approaches, radiant in her wedding gown, concern clouding her features. "Darnell, is everything okay? We're supposed to start in 5 minutes." Darnell takes a deep breath, placing a protective hand on Amara's shoulder. He maintains his composure despite the rising tension, aware that every guest is now watching the confrontation. "Aaron," he says quietly to his best man, "would you mind getting the contract from my briefcase in the car?" Aaron nods and moves quickly toward the parking area, jaw clenched in barely contained anger. Diane's gaze sweeps over the decorations with exaggerated scrutiny. "Are all these modifications to the property approved?" she asks loudly. "The flowered arch? These lanterns? I don't recall seeing these items in the venue's standard offerings." Guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. The string quartet falters, uncertain whether to continue playing. Amara's mother rises from her front row seat, concern etched on her face. "Darnell," Amara whispers, "what's happening?" "Just a misunderstanding," he reassures her, though his eyes never leave Diane's face. "It'll be resolved in a minute." Amara's father approaches, his formal posture radiating dignity. "Is there a problem here? We're about to begin a wedding ceremony." Diane takes a step back, placing herself slightly behind Franklin. "I don't feel safe with all these people here," she says, voice pitched to Carrie. "There are too many of them." Franklin winces at her words, visibly uncomfortable but failing to challenge her. Instead, he turns to Darnell. "Perhaps we could clear this up quickly. Your guests are waiting." Aaron returns with a leather portfolio, extracting a multi-page document. "Here's the contract," he says, handing it to Darnell, who passes it to Franklin. Franklin reviews the document, nodding. Everything appears to be in order. All the signatures, deposit receipts. Diane leans over his shoulder, pointing at the signature line. "That doesn't look like your handwriting, Franklin. Are you sure this is legitimate?" Franklin pulls the contract away from her view. "Diane, this is absolutely legitimate. The Taylor-Bennett wedding is properly booked and paid for. Now please return to your property and allow these people to enjoy their celebration." "These people," Darnell repeats quietly, the words hanging in the air. Diane stands her ground. "If you won't handle this, I'll call the authorities. This is clearly an unauthorized gathering." "There's nothing unauthorized about my wedding," Darnell states firmly, conscious of Amara's trembling hand in his. "We've complied with every requirement." "Let's proceed with the ceremony," he suggests, turning to Franklin. "Your neighbor is welcome to make whatever calls she feels necessary." Diane pulls out her phone, deliberately taking photos of the guests, the decorations, and the setup. "I'm documenting everything for evidence," she announces. Amara, still in her wedding dress, is now surrounded by concerned family members. She explains the situation in hushed tones, her expression a mixture of confusion and distress on what should be the happiest day of her life. From the periphery, Darnell overhears Diane speaking to another neighbor who has approached the property line. "They probably found this place online and thought they could just show up," she says loudly enough to be heard. "You know how they do." The officiant approaches Darnell, Bible in hand. "Should we begin?" he asks uncertainly. Darnell nods, swallowing his humiliation. "Yes. Amara has been dreaming of this day. I won't let anything ruin it for her." The music resumes, but the atmosphere has shifted. What should have been a moment of pure joy now carries an undercurrent of tension and indignity that no one can ignore. The ceremony begins despite the tension. Amara walks down the aisle on her father's arm, her smile determinedly bright despite the whispers among the guests. Darnell watches her approach, his love evident in his expression, but his attention divides when he notices a police cruiser pulling up at the venue entrance. His eyes meet Aaron's. A subtle nod passes between them, acknowledgement of the situation's escalation. Aaron understands immediately, slipping toward the back row of seats, ready to intercept. Amara reaches the altar, taking Darnell's hands. Her fingers tremble slightly in his steady grip. "You look beautiful," Darnell whispers, focusing entirely on her for this moment. The officiant begins the ceremony, his voice carrying across the lawn. Guests settle, trying to recapture the solemnity of the occasion despite the disturbance. When the time comes for their vows, Darnell holds Amara's gaze intently. He recites the promises they wrote together, then adds words they hadn't rehearsed. "I vow to you, Amara, that I will always protect you, stand up for you, and ensure justice prevails in our life together. No one will diminish the light you bring to this world, not today, not ever." Something in his tone makes her eyes glisten with understanding. She squeezes his hands in response. At the back of the gathering, Aaron approaches the two officers who now stand at the perimeter. He speaks to them in hushed tones, gesturing occasionally toward the ceremony. Diane strides toward the officers, pointing emphatically at the wedding. "That's it," she says loudly. "That's the unauthorized gathering I reported." The officers exchange glances. One of them recognizes Aaron from the courthouse where he works. Their posture shifts, becoming hesitant. "Ma'am, you reported trespassing, but this appears to be a legitimate event," the senior officer says. Diane's voice rises. They don't have proper authorization. I've lived here 15 years, and I know what events are approved. They're damaging private property with all those decorations. The officers remain at the perimeter, trying to assess the situation discreetly without interrupting the ceremony. Darnell notices their presence as he slides the ring onto Amara's finger. The gold band catches the sunlight, momentarily distracting from the tension surrounding them. "They're not going to ruin this, are they?" Amara whispers, barely moving her lips. Darnell squeezes her hand reassuringly. "Nothing will ruin this day," he promises, continuing with the ceremony. Diane watches the officer's reluctance with growing frustration. She steps away, pulling out her phone again. Her fingers move rapidly across the screen, scrolling to a contact labeled Commissioner's Office. "This requires someone with actual authority," she mutters, pressing the call button and moving out of earshot. The officiant pronounces Darnell and Amara husband and wife. Applause erupts from the gathering as they share their first kiss as a married couple. For a moment, the intrusion fades into the background. As they turn to face their guests, Darnell maintains his smile for the cameras, but leans close to Aaron as they pass the first row. "Call Chief Bennett," he whispers. "Tell him his niece's wedding is being disrupted by a false police report. Then call Commissioner Jackson. It's time." Aaron nods once, discreetly moving away from the recessional line. He pulls out his phone, stepping behind a decorative pillar as he makes the call, speaking urgently but quietly into the receiver. "Sir, we have a situation at Lakeside Gardens. Sheriff Taylor's wedding." "Yes, sir. Racial profiling, false police report. They've already sent patrol units." The reception begins tentatively. Under a white tent beside the lake, the band plays their first song as Darnell leads Amara onto the dance floor for their first dance. Her gown sweeps across the polished wooden floor, temporarily creating an illusion of normalcy. "I'm so sorry about this," Darnell murmurs against her ear as they sway to the music. "It's not your fault," she replies, forcing a smile for watching relatives. "Just hold me!" Before they complete their first turn around the floor, the two officers approach the edge of the dance floor. Diane follows closely behind them, her expression triumphant. "Excuse me," the senior officer says, clearly uncomfortable with the interruption. "I apologize, but we've received a complaint about an unauthorized gathering at this location." The music falters. Guests who had begun to relax now tense again, conversations dying mid-sentence. Darnell stops dancing but keeps Amara's hand firmly in his. "Officer," he says calmly, "perhaps we could speak privately." Before the officer can respond, Diane interjects, stepping forward. "I want them removed immediately. They have no right to be here." Murmurs ripple through the gathering. Several guests pull out phones, beginning to record the confrontation. Amara's father steps forward, his dignified bearing commanding attention. "This is my daughter's wedding," he states firmly. "We paid for everything months ago. We have all the documentation." Diane dismisses him with a wave of her hand. "I know every event that happens here. This wasn't approved through proper channels. Franklin is being intimidated." The officers look toward Franklin, who hovers at the edge of the tent. "Sir, can you verify this reservation?" Franklin nods, though his eyes dart nervously toward Diane. "Yes, the Taylor-Bennett wedding is a legitimate reservation. Everything was handled properly." "He feels pressured to say that," Diane insists, voice rising. "Look at how many of them there are. Of course he's intimidated." The senior officer pulls his partner aside, conferring quietly. After a moment, he returns to Darnell and Amara. "Sir, ma'am, I apologize for the disruption. Given the situation, might I suggest moving your reception indoors? It would minimize disturbance and allow us to sort this out." Darnell's jaw tightens. The suggestion is clear. Move out of public view, make yourselves less visible. He's familiar with the implication, has seen it countless times in his professional life. He glances at Amara, at her family, at the guests who traveled to celebrate with them. Making a scene would only further ruin their day. He swallows his anger. If that would help resolve the situation, he agrees, his tone measured despite the fury building inside him. Amara's eyes fill with tears as she watches months of planning crumble. The outdoor reception they designed, the fairy lights strung through trees, the lakeside sunset photos, the starlight dancing, all must be abandoned. "We'll need to move everything inside," she says, voice breaking slightly. "All the decorations, the cake table, the guest book station." The officers nod, relieved at the apparent resolution. "We'll remain on site until everything is settled," the senior officer assures them, though it's unclear who he's actually reassuring. As guests begin reluctantly gathering decorations and centerpieces, Diane watches from the sidelines, arms crossed over her chest. A satisfied smile plays at her lips as the beautiful outdoor setup is dismantled piece by piece. "The venue's reputation must be maintained," she says to no one in particular, loud enough to be overheard. "Standards need to be upheld." The reception continues awkwardly in the indoor hall, a space clearly too small for the 150 guests now crammed between round tables. The elegant flow of the planned outdoor celebration has been reduced to a congested gathering, with servers struggling to navigate between tightly packed chairs. Darnell stands near the hastily relocated cake table, watching his wedding deteriorate further with each passing minute. The officers remain outside, visible through the windows as they speak into their radios. "I'm sorry about all this," Franklin approaches, hands fidgeting nervously. Diane sits on the local neighborhood association board. She has significant influence in the community. Darnell's expression remains neutral. "I see. She's never been this persistent before," Franklin continues, not meeting Darnell's eyes, "though she has raised concerns about certain types of events in the past." "Certain types," Darnell repeats, voice deliberately even. Franklin looks away, confirming what Darnell already knows. Through the window, additional police vehicles pull into the parking area, 3 more cruisers, responding to Diane's escalated complaint. Darnell watches them arrive, a muscle working in his jaw. Across the room, Amara's mother dabs at her eyes with a napkin. "All these months of planning," she whispers to her husband. "Our baby's special day, ruined." Darnell excuses himself from Franklin and steps outside to speak with the new officers. The evening air has cooled, but tension heats the atmosphere as Diane immediately approaches the group. "They forced their way in when the venue was closed," she tells the ranking officer loudly. "They're claiming to have a reservation, but it's obviously falsified." Franklin is too intimidated to admit the truth. The ranking officer, a lieutenant, glances toward Darnell. "Sir, we've received multiple reports about an unauthorized gathering. We may need to see documentation." "I've shown documentation to the venue owner and the first responding officers," Darnell replies calmly. "My wife and I have a valid contract for our wedding today." "Wife?" Diane interrupts. "So you've actually conducted a ceremony without proper verification of your reservation?" The lieutenant looks increasingly uncomfortable. "Given the conflicting accounts, we may need to clear the premises temporarily to sort this out." Inside, guests sense the escalating situation. Some begin collecting their belongings, preparing to leave rather than witness further humiliation. The celebration atmosphere has completely evaporated. Amara joins Darnell outside, the hem of her once pristine wedding dress now dirty from moving between venues. She stands beside him, shoulders straight despite her evident distress. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asks. Diane cuts in before anyone can respond. "I told you they wouldn't cooperate. They don't understand they're trespassing." Amara turns to face her directly, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "This is our wedding day. We have every right to be here." "People like you always think you're entitled to whatever you want," Diane responds, the implication hanging heavily in the air between them. Shocked silence follows her words. Even the officers look taken aback by the blatant statement. Darnell places his arm around Amara's shoulders, drawing her close. He leans down, whispering something in her ear that the others can't hear. Amara's expression transforms from distress to resolve, her back straightening as she nods almost imperceptibly. Everyone, if I could have your attention, Darnell calls, returning to the reception hall with Amara by his side. We'd like to gather everyone for a group photo to commemorate this day. Guests exchange confused glances but begin assembling near the back wall. The photographer, sensing something beyond a simple photo opportunity, positions himself carefully. Outside, the ranking officer confers with his team, preparing to make an announcement about clearing the venue. One officer reviews the department's trespassing protocols on his phone, frowning at the procedures. Diane hovers near the window, watching the indoor gathering with narrowed eyes. Her lips curve in satisfaction as she sees guests collecting purses and jackets, assuming they're preparing to leave. Inside, Aaron moves efficiently among key family members, discreetly passing small cards with handwritten instructions. Amara's father reads his card, then immediately pulls out his phone and begins recording the interaction between officers and venue staff. Franklin's phone rings. He steps away to answer it, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as he listens to the caller. "Yes, Commissioner," he says, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Yes, they're still here. The situation has escalated, unfortunately." Outside, two unmarked vehicles with government plates pull into the parking area, followed by a black SUV. These aren't police cruisers, but official county vehicles. Men and women in formal attire emerge, conferring briefly before approaching the venue. Diane notices the new arrivals and straightens her posture, assuming these are the reinforcements she requested through her connections. She steps forward to meet them. "Thank you for responding so quickly," she says to the lead figure, a distinguished black man in his 60s. "The situation is becoming untenable." The ranking police officer touches his earpiece, listening to an incoming transmission. His face pales slightly. He gestures urgently to his fellow officers, who immediately stand at attention. Inside, Darnell addresses the officers who have entered the reception hall. "Have you verified the complaint properly?" he asks, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. The officer shifts uncomfortably. "Sir, we're following protocol for a reported trespassing." "Have you seen the contract and payment receipts for this event?" Darnell continues, stepping closer. "Not personally, no," the officer admits. "We were responding to multiple complaints." Outside, Diane's voice rises as she speaks to the newly arrived officials. "They're obviously fake! Why would these people be at a place like this?" Franklin, returning from his phone call, approaches the officers with visible anxiety. His eyes dart between Diane and the officials now walking toward the entrance. Darnell checks his watch, then nods subtly to Aaron. "Right on time," he murmurs. The new arrivals enter the venue with purposeful strides. County Commissioner Jackson, a tall man with silver temples and an authoritative bearing, leads the group. Behind him walks Chief of Police Bennett, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the highest law enforcement rank in the county. The room falls silent as they enter. The officers already present stand straighter, uncertainty evident in their postures. Diane rushes toward Commissioner Jackson, relief washing over her face. "Thank you for coming," she says. "These people are trespassing and refusing to leave despite multiple warnings." Commissioner Jackson regards her coolly. "Ms. Reynolds, we haven't formally met, but I've heard disturbing things about this situation." "Yes, it's completely unacceptable," Diane continues, not registering his tone. "They've taken over the venue without proper authorization and—" "That's not what I meant," the commissioner interrupts, his voice sharp. Chief Bennett moves past them, walking directly to Amara. To everyone's surprise, he embraces her warmly. "I'm so sorry I'm late, niece," he says, loud enough for all to hear. "Traffic was terrible." "Uncle James," Amara responds, returning his embrace. "I'm just glad you're here now." Diane freezes, her mouth opening slightly as the implications begin to register. Darnell steps forward, finally reaching into his jacket. He produces his sheriff's badge and ID, holding them up where everyone can see. The gold shield catches the light, the emblem of the county sheriff's department unmistakable. The officers who had been questioning the wedding party visibly pale, some taking involuntary steps backward. Sheriff Darnell Taylor, County Sheriff's Department, Darnell states, his voice resonating with authority that was deliberately subdued until this moment. These officers responded to a false report without proper verification, disrupting a legitimate, paid event on private property. Chief Bennett stands beside his niece, his expression stern. A false report that interrupted my niece's wedding. Diane's face drains of color. She stammers, struggling to process the reversal. I had no idea. I was just concerned about unauthorized use. If you had identified yourself earlier, if we were a white couple, would identification have been necessary? Darnell asks quietly. Commissioner Jackson examines the venue contract Franklin nervously presents. This reservation was made 6 months ago, paid in full, with all proper documentation, he confirms, looking directly at Diane. Franklin clears his throat. Ms. Reynolds has raised concerns about certain types of events here before, he admits reluctantly. The officers who initially responded begin apologizing profusely to Darnell and Amara. Sheriff Taylor, we had no idea. That's precisely the problem, Darnell interrupts. He turns to address the entire gathering, his voice clear and measured. My wife and I chose not to immediately identify myself because this isn't about my position. This is about how quickly assumptions were made about who belongs in spaces like this. Chief Bennett steps forward, authority radiating from his stance. I want statements from all responding officers. I want to know exactly who received what information and why proper verification protocols weren't followed. The original responding officers look stricken, suddenly facing not just an embarrassing mistake, but potentially serious professional consequences. Diane attempts to edge toward the exit, but an officer discreetly moves to block her path. Commissioner Jackson approaches the wedding party, his expression solemn. On behalf of the county, I offer my sincere apologies for this serious breakdown in protocol and judgment. This is not how our community treats its citizens, especially not those who serve it with distinction. Amara's father steps forward, phone still recording. I have the entire incident documented, including all statements made by Ms. Reynolds. Darnell stands at the center of the room, no longer the affable groom, but every inch the sheriff, commanding respect with his mere presence. Today was meant to celebrate our union, he says, voice carrying to every corner. Instead, it became an example of why I became an officer of the law in the first place. The room falls silent as the full weight of the situation settles over everyone present. What began as a joyous celebration, then devolved into humiliation, has now transformed into something far more consequential. A moment of reckoning. 1 week after the wedding, Darnell sits at the conference table in the county administration building. Uniform crisp, badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Around him gather county officials, legal representatives, and management from Lakeside Gardens' parent company, Prestige Venues International. Darnell slides a USB drive across the polished table. This contains all evidence related to the incident at my wedding, he states. Video recordings from multiple guests, written statements, and a timeline of events. The county attorney plugs the drive into her laptop. On the wall screen appears Amara's father's recording. Diane's voice clear as she declares, "People like you always think you're entitled to whatever you want." Murmurs fill the room as more clips play. Diane pointing at wedding guests, claiming they couldn't possibly have a legitimate reservation. Diane telling officers that Franklin was too intimidated to tell the truth about these people trespassing. We've collected statements from 23 wedding guests, Darnell continues, his voice professional despite the personal nature of the incident. Each describes the systematic escalation of harassment throughout what should have been a celebration. Franklin shifts uncomfortably in his chair as attention turns to him. Ms. Reynolds has filed complaints about events at Lakeside Gardens before, he admits reluctantly. Primarily when the clientele was diverse. You mean when the clients were black or brown, corrects the Prestige Venues executive, a woman whose tight expression suggests serious corporate consequences are imminent. Yes, Franklin acknowledges, not meeting anyone's eyes. She's complained about noise, parking, decorations, but only for certain events. The county legal team exchanges glances. We're looking at multiple violations here, says the lead attorney, flipping through her notes. Filing a false police report, harassment, potential civil rights violations, misuse of emergency services. The responding officers failed to follow verification protocols, adds Chief Bennett, who sits beside his niece. They acted on assumptions rather than facts, escalating a situation that should never have occurred. Commissioner Jackson steeples his fingers. This incident reveals systemic failures at multiple levels: law enforcement response, venue management, neighborhood association oversight, all contributed to this disgraceful situation. Diane sits stiffly beside her attorney, her previously confident demeanor replaced by defensive rigidity. Gone are the pressed khakis and polo shirt, replaced by a conservative suit that can't disguise her diminished presence. My client was merely expressing concerns about potential unauthorized use of a property adjoining her home, her attorney argues. She had no way of knowing Sheriff Taylor's position. This isn't about my position, Darnell interjects, leaning forward. This is about assumptions made based solely on the color of our skin. Had we been a white couple, would anyone have questioned our right to be there? The room falls silent. The Prestige Venue's executive clears her throat. Effective immediately, we're terminating our relationship with Mr. Whitmore as manager of Lakeside Gardens. His failure to protect clients from harassment represents an unacceptable breach of our standards. She turns to Darnell and Amara. We will, of course, provide a full refund for your wedding, along with appropriate compensation for the distress caused. Additionally, she continues, we're implementing new training protocols for all venue staff across our properties nationwide. What happened to the Taylors will not happen to another couple under our management. Amara, seated beside Darnell in professional attire rather than wedding finery, speaks for the first time. This isn't about money, she says firmly. This is about ensuring that spaces remain accessible to everyone, regardless of appearance. Chief Bennett distributes folders to everyone at the table. The department is implementing mandatory training on implicit bias and proper response protocols. The officers involved are currently on administrative leave pending review. Diane's attorney leans toward her, whispering urgently. She nods reluctantly. My client is prepared to discuss settlement terms to avoid civil litigation, he announces. She recognizes that her actions may have been misinterpreted. Misinterpreted, Amara repeats, her voice steady despite her evident disbelief. There was no misinterpretation when she claimed we couldn't possibly belong at that venue. When she called the police repeatedly based on nothing but the color of our skin. Darnell places a calming hand on Amara's arm before addressing the room. What we're proposing goes beyond individual accountability. We need systemic change. He slides a document forward. A comprehensive proposal for community oversight of venue operations, revised police response protocols, and accountability measures for neighborhood associations. This incident didn't happen in isolation, he explains. It happened because multiple systems failed simultaneously, enabling one person's prejudice to disrupt lives and potentially create a dangerous situation. Commissioner Jackson reviews the proposal, nodding slowly. We'll begin implementing these recommendations immediately, starting with a complete review of neighborhood association complaint procedures. The county attorney makes notes on her legal pad. Ms. Reynolds will face criminal charges for filing a false police report, with potential additional charges related to civil rights violations. Media representatives at the back of the room scribble furiously, the story already gaining national attention through social media clips of the confrontation. This isn't just about one wedding, Darnell concludes, his voice carrying the weight of both personal experience and professional authority. It's about ensuring that every citizen can occupy public and private spaces without having their legitimacy questioned based on appearance. As the meeting concludes, Diane avoids eye contact with everyone, her previously self-assured presence now diminished by the weight of consequences that extend far beyond what she envisioned when making that first call. The county courthouse bustles with activity. But courtroom 3 commands a particular tension. Diane Reynolds sits beside her attorney, almost unrecognizable from the confident woman who disrupted the Taylor wedding. Her hair, previously highlighted and styled, now hangs limply around her face. Her designer outfit has been replaced by a subdued navy suit that suggests humility rather than authority. Judge Hernandez reviews the evidence files, occasionally glancing over her reading glasses at the defendant. The court has reviewed the recording submitted as evidence, she states. Particularly troubling is the pattern of behavior established through witness testimony. The prosecutor stands, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, the state would like to emphasize that this isn't an isolated incident. Ms. Reynolds has filed 17 complaints against events at Lakeside Gardens in the past 3 years. 15 of those complaints targeted gatherings of minority groups. Diane stares at the table before her, avoiding the eyes of spectators filling the public seating. Furthermore, the prosecutor continues, venue staff have provided written testimony about Ms. Reynolds' history of interference with events involving people of color. Former manager Franklin Whitmore has admitted to accommodating these complaints by scheduling certain events on days when Ms. Reynolds was known to be away from her property. Judge Hernandez's expression hardens. So the venue was complicit in this discrimination? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Whitmore has provided a sworn statement acknowledging his role in enabling Ms. Reynolds' behavior over several years. Diane's attorney rises. Your Honor, my client is a concerned citizen who has lived beside Lakeside Gardens for 15 years. Her complaints stemmed from legitimate concerns about noise ordinances and property values. Yet she only filed complaints about certain types of gatherings, Judge Hernandez observes. Curious pattern for noise concerns. Ms. Reynolds has no history of racial animus, her attorney insists. This unfortunate incident has been mischaracterized. The prosecutor activates the courtroom display. Permission to play Exhibit 14, Your Honor? The judge nods. On screen appears Diane's face, contorted with indignation as she tells the responding officers, "Why would these people be at a place like this?" Her emphasis on "these people" unmistakable. Diane's shoulders slump as her own words fill the courtroom. The prosecutor calls his next witness. The state calls Barbara Henderson. A woman from Diane's neighborhood takes the stand, nervously adjusting her glasses. Ms. Reynolds has served as our neighborhood association president for 8 years, she testifies. During that time, she's blocked at least 3 families of color from purchasing homes by finding supposed covenant violations that were never enforced with white home buyers. More witnesses follow. Neighbors, former venue employees, even the realtor who sold Diane her home, each describing a pattern of behavior that now appears as an obvious crusade rather than coincidental complaints. Diane confers with her attorney, who eventually stands. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, my client wishes to change her plea to guilty on the charges of filing a false police report and obstruction of lawful business. A murmur runs through the courtroom. Judge Hernandez surveys Diane over her glasses. Ms. Reynolds, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to trial? Yes, Your Honor, Diane responds, her voice barely audible. Very well. The court accepts your change of plea. When sentencing begins, Judge Hernandez's voice carries no sympathy. Ms. Reynolds, you have used law enforcement as a weapon against people based solely on their appearance. This behavior undermines the entire justice system, wastes valuable public resources, and violates the fundamental rights of your fellow citizens. Diane stares at her hands, nodding slightly. You are sentenced to 200 hours of community service at the Cultural Diversity Center, a fine of $10,000 to cover costs incurred by emergency services, and mandatory completion of a racial sensitivity program. Additionally, you will be on probation for 2 years. In the gallery, Darnell sits in civilian clothes, deliberately avoiding his uniform to ensure his presence doesn't influence the proceedings. Amara holds his hand, her expression solemn as justice unfolds through proper channels rather than through his position of authority. Outside the courthouse, reporters gather around neighborhood association representatives announcing Diane's removal from her leadership position. "The actions of our former president do not reflect our community's values," the new president states firmly. "We are implementing new bylaws to prevent discriminatory practices." 3 days later, a for sale sign appears on Diane's property. Neighbors watch from windows and porches as she supervises movers loading a truck with her belongings. No one approaches to say goodbye. "Good riddance," mutters a neighbor to a local news reporter documenting the aftermath. "Maybe now we can build a community based on who people are, not what they look like." Diane works methodically, packing her car with personal items that won't fit in the moving truck. Her phone doesn't ring. No friends come to help. The social capital she once wielded has evaporated, leaving her isolated in the community she once thought she controlled. 6 months after the wedding, Lakeside Gardens hosts a different kind of gathering. Under white tents on the manicured lawn, community leaders, law enforcement officials, and venue industry representatives assemble for what the banner calls Community Unity Forum, creating spaces for everyone. Darnell stands at the podium in his sheriff's uniform, surveying the diverse crowd. "6 months ago, my wedding was disrupted by assumptions about who belongs in certain spaces," he begins. "Today, we gather to ensure that experience drives meaningful change, rather than just becoming another painful anecdote." The new management team from Lakeside Gardens unveils a comprehensive anti-discrimination policy displayed prominently on an easel. "This policy will be posted at every entrance," explains the new manager, Sierra Washington. "Additionally, all staff undergo mandatory training on creating welcoming environments for all clients, regardless of race, orientation, or background." Chief Bennett takes the stage next, projecting statistics onto the screen behind him. "In the 6 months since implementing our new response protocols, unverified complaint responses have decreased by 63%, he announces. "Officers now require specific, factual information before responding to property disputes." He demonstrates the department's new verification checklist, which requires officers to document specific allegations rather than responding to vague complaints about people who don't belong or look suspicious. Most importantly, Chief Bennett concludes, every responding officer must articulate specific behaviors rather than subjective impressions before taking action. Representatives from the Regional Wedding Planners Association present their newly adopted client protection standards. "Every member of our association now includes anti-harassment provisions in their contracts," explains their president. "Venues must guarantee intervention if clients face discrimination during their events." In the audience, Amara sits with her hand resting on her visibly pregnant belly. She nods approvingly as each speaker outlines concrete changes rather than vague promises. When invited to speak, she walks carefully to the podium, her pregnancy advanced enough to affect her gait. "Healing doesn't come from punishment alone," she tells the gathering. "It comes from acknowledging harm and creating systems that prevent its recurrence." Franklin Whitmore, the former venue manager, sits in the back row. No longer employed by prestige venues, he now volunteers with an anti-discrimination organization, using his experience as a cautionary tale in corporate training sessions. "I failed to protect my clients," he admits when called upon. "I prioritized appeasing a problematic neighbor over ensuring equal access to our venue. That failure cost me my career, but more importantly, it harmed people who trusted me with one of their most important days." Local government officials present the newly established Community Liaison Program, which includes representatives from diverse backgrounds who help bridge gaps between neighborhood associations and new residents. "We've discovered that most discriminatory actions begin with simple unfamiliarity," explains Councilwoman Patel. "This program creates opportunities for connection before assumptions can take root." As the forum continues, media representatives document the proceedings, many following up on their initial coverage of the wedding incident. A national news anchor interviews Darnell about the ripple effects of standing his ground. Statistics show similar incidents have declined by 27% in venues that have adopted these new protocols. Darnell explains, pointing to data compiled by his department. When accountability systems exist, people think twice before weaponizing their assumptions. The forum concludes with Darnell receiving the Community Leadership Award, a glass plaque engraved with the words, "For transforming personal injustice into community progress." He accepts it with characteristic humility. This recognition belongs to everyone who turned a painful moment into a catalyst for change, he says, particularly to those who face similar discrimination but lack the position or platform to effect systemic reform. Several couples approach the microphone to share similar experiences at various venues, being questioned about their reservations, asked for additional verification, or treated with suspicion. Unlike the Taylors, they lacked the authority to command immediate respect when challenged. "What happened at our wedding happens daily to people without badges or connections," Darnell acknowledges. "Our responsibility extends beyond this single incident to addressing the systems that make such discrimination possible." The gathering concludes with attendees signing a community pledge. "I will report and address discriminatory behavior whenever I witness it, regardless of my relationship to the perpetrator." 1 year after the wedding that became a catalyst for change, Darnell and Amara host an intimate gathering at their home. Their 4-month-old daughter Maya sleeps peacefully in a bassinet decorated with fairy lights, oblivious to the significance of the day her parents commemorate. The living room walls display framed photographs, the interrupted ceremony alongside images from their vow renewal 6 months later. The contrast between the tension in the first photos and the joy in the second tells a story without words. Amara's father raises his glass in a toast. "To my daughter and son-in-law who faced humiliation with dignity and transformed a painful moment into progress. Your strength continues to inspire this community." Glasses clink as family members and close friends murmur agreement. The atmosphere carries none of the tension from a year ago, replaced by the warm certainty of being among people who see each other fully. Darnell, dressed in casual clothes rather than his uniform, shares updated statistics from a folder on the coffee table. "Discriminatory complaints have decreased 47% since implementing verification protocols," he explains. "And when such complaints do occur, they're documented and tracked to identify patterns." Through the window, they can see lakeside gardens in the distance, where a new family hosts a quinceañera celebration. The venue's entrance now displays a prominent non-discrimination policy sign, visible even from the road. "The new neighbors seem nice," Amara observes, gesturing toward the home formerly owned by Diane. A young interracial couple had purchased the property, immediately integrating into community activities and volunteering at neighborhood events. "They brought us a casserole when Maya was born," Darnell agrees. Times are changing. 2 of the officers who responded to Diane's calls that day now lead the department's community outreach program. After retraining, they've become advocates for the verification protocols they once neglected. "Officer Sanderson asked me to share that their department has conducted 53 cultural sensitivity workshops for the public this year," Darnell tells the gathering. "Complaints from the public have actually decreased as understanding increases." Amara rests her hand on a folder containing documents for the Amara Taylor Scholarship for Law Enforcement Diversity, which provides funding for minority students entering police academy training. "Systems only change when the people within them change," she says softly. "Education opens paths for those who will approach authority differently." In the year since the incident, Lakeside Gardens has hosted 27 weddings for couples of color, a significant increase from previous years. The venue now serves as a monthly gathering space for community dialogue sessions on cultural understanding. Former venue owner Franklin, after extensive sensitivity training, now consults with hospitality businesses on creating inclusive environments. His willingness to acknowledge his failings has gradually rebuilt some of his damaged reputation. As evening falls, Darnell and Amara step onto their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Their daughter sleeps against Amara's shoulder, tiny fingers curled around her mother's necklace. "I sometimes wonder if we should have revealed my position immediately," Darnell admits, voicing a thought that occasionally still troubles him. "Would it have spared us the humiliation?" "Perhaps," Amara acknowledges. But then the system wouldn't have shown its flaws so clearly. Sometimes revealing truth requires allowing injustice to fully manifest before addressing it. Darnell nods, watching lights come on across the community as evening settles. True justice isn't about power or position, he reflects. It's about ensuring dignity and respect for everyone, regardless of who they appear to be. The quiet moment holds no tension, no lingering resentment, only the peaceful certainty that their stand against discrimination has created ripples extending far beyond their personal experience. Did this story impact you? Don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Beat Stories right now by clicking that red button below. Ring that notification bell to catch every new Beat Stories video the moment it drops. Our community thrives when you share these stories with people who need to hear them. Drop a comment telling us about similar experiences in your community or how you've stood against discrimination. Your voice matters in this conversation. Subscribe, like, share. 3 simple actions that help these crucial stories reach those who need them most. Together, we're creating a world where everyone belongs, without question. Beat Stories. Real situations, real consequences, real change. Subscribe now.
They say it's just how the world works. We say, change it. At Beat Stories, we capture the exact moment when justice meets its match. Subscribe if you're tired of the same excuses wrapped in different uniforms.